Hey guys, tonight we begin with something that might surprise you. Medieval kids weren't just small, grimy adults in training, they were full-on chaos gremlins with their own miniature routines, dramas, and disappointments. So let's rewind the centuries, past the plagues and the pitchforks, and slip into the sandals, or more likely, barefoot soles, of a child waking up in a medieval village. You'll need to brace yourself. Between the drafty cottages, the early morning chores, and the ever-present scent of something suspiciously like goat breath, this wasn't exactly a childhood designed for leisure. And heads up, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your day begins before the sun even knows what it's doing. The rooster crows like it has a personal vendetta, and you jolt awake on a straw-stuffed mattress that smells like yesterday's onions. Your blanket, a scratchy wool relic shared with two siblings and one suspiciously damp spot. The cottage is dim and smoky, lit only by the embers of last night's fire and the faint morning light slipping through wooden shutters that never quite shut. You stretch, yawn, and try not to inhale too deeply. You'd like to start your day, not pass out from the aroma of last night's cabbage stew. Your parents are already up, clanging pots, muttering about the cow's mood, and urging you to get moving before the day escapes and takes the eggs with it. You throw on the same tunic you wore yesterday, and the day before, and probably all of last week. Laundry's a luxury, and body odor builds character. Your first mission? Water. The well isn't exactly next door. You trudge barefoot down a dirt path, avoiding goat droppings and thistles, carrying a wooden bucket that weighs approximately one full tantrum. The dew-soaked grass feels cold between your toes, and you quietly hope the frogs are still sleeping. The well's rope is rough, the crank is creaky, and the water is icy, but hey, at least it's less muddy than last week. Back home, breakfast is bubbling, a bowl of pottage, which sounds fancy until you realize it's basically oats, random root vegetables, and yesterday's regrets, all stirred together. Sometimes there's milk, sometimes there's bugs. Either way, it's hot and yours, unless your brother steals it first. You slurp fast while watching steam curl around your knuckles. Luxury. After breakfast, it's time for chores. Because medieval children aren't lounging around waiting for cartoons, they're unpaid labor with high liability. You sweep the dirt floor, gather kindling for the fire, and chase chickens that clearly have a personal vendetta against your legs. Maybe you're sent to collect eggs, and maybe the hen pecks your wrist like you insulted her ancestors. Again. Some days, you help in the fields. You're small, so your job might be weeding, carrying baskets, or spreading manure. Yes, that manure. Your arms get scratched. Your back gets sore. Your soul wonders what it did in a past life to deserve this. Historians still argue whether peasant kids internalized their role as workers or just quietly plotted escape via tree climbing. If your family's better off, or in the rare case you're a young noble, you might have a different morning routine. Picture silk nightshirts, actual braid without mold, and a nursemaid who gently wakes you with soft words instead of shouts. You stretch lazily while someone else deals with the firewood. Jealous yet? But even noble kids aren't exempt from duty. You might have to say morning prayers, recite Latin, or practice bowing at imaginary dukes. It's exhausting being entitled. Still, you get your porridge with honey and your bread with cheese, which is practically breakfast royalty. Whether you're peasant or privileged, you learn quickly. Childhood is a brief training montage before real life grabs you by the scruff. You adapt, you memorize tasks, and you start learning the fine art of negotiation, like how to trade firewood duty for a slightly longer play break, or how to convince your siblings to do your sweeping by claiming ghosts live under the table. And somehow, in all this grime and bustle, you feel alive. The crows call. The oxen moo. The sky stretches impossibly high above your smoky little village. You might not know what a weekend is, and toys are mostly carved sticks and round stones, but you've got a routine, a family, and the stubborn resilience of someone who can dodge a goat kick before they learn to read. By the time the sun climbs higher and the day warms, you're already halfway through your tasks. Your fingers are muddy. Your knees are scraped. You're hungry again and it's not even noon. But don't worry, there's bread, broth, and maybe a beetle waiting in the next section. By mid-morning, your stomach is growling like the neighbor's dog that keeps chasing chickens and moral boundaries. It's time for your second meal, and let's not pretend it's glamorous. You don't call it lunch, that's a word for people who eat in courses. You call it food. If you're lucky. The fire's been stoked again, the pot hanging over it gurgles like a swamp with ambitions, and you gather around the hearth with your siblings, still smelling faintly of goat and ashes. Today's offering, a chunk of coarse rye bread so dense it could double as a doorstop, and a ladle of broth that's more water than substance. There might be a carrot floating in it. You stare at it like it's a celebrity. This isn't the kind of meal where you use spoons with engraved initials. You use fingers, wooden bowls, and sometimes just slurping directly from the edge like a medieval raccoon. A peasant child's diet isn't about variety. It's about, will this keep me standing until the next chore? And yes, bugs sometimes find their way in. Tiny weevils love flour more than you love naps. Still, you munch happily. Your taste buds adjusted somewhere around age 3. Bread with a crust thick enough to chip a tooth. That's the dream. Broth with one sprig of parsley. You're practically feasting. And if you find an actual lump of meat in there, a rare occurrence, you stare at it reverently before deciding whether to eat it, trade it, or just frame it in your memory forever. Meanwhile, your parents are probably discussing crop yields or fretting about the weather. Rain's good for the barley, bad for the laundry. You listen with half an ear, more focused on not spilling your meager meal, because if you drop your food, that's it. No 5-second rule. No replacement. Just hunger and regret. In noble households, lunchtime looks a bit fancier. You sit at a trestle table alongside your siblings, attended by servants or, if you're in training, future enemies. You might be served trenchers, slabs of stale bread used as edible plates, topped with meats, stews, and vegetables. You'd eat with your fingers, but daintily, because everyone's watching. The stew might have spices imported from distant lands, like pepper or saffron, because why not add a hint of extravagance to your childhood? Still, you don't exactly get to order what you want. Nobility or not, you eat what's put in front of you, and if the cook was feeling lazy or rebellious, you might end up with something that even the stable boy questions. Historians still argue whether medieval meals were communal bonding experiences or just noisy scrum sessions with fewer elbows than expected. What we do know is that food was social glue. You sat with your people. You shared. You passed bread. You asked your sibling if they were going to eat that potato and stole it anyway. After your meal, there's no dessert cart or sugary reward. If you're a peasant, maybe you gnaw on an apple or some dried fruit, if it's in season and not moldy. If you're noble, perhaps candied nuts or a bite of honeyed something. But mostly, you wash your bowl, wipe your hands on your tunic, because manners are still evolving, and get ready to dive back into the medieval chaos. And here's where it gets real. Unlike modern kids who vanish into tablet screens or argue over Minecraft mods, medieval children don't get me time. They get time to survive and hope the sheep don't escape again. Still, food is memory. It's warmth. It's routine. And even the simplest meal, just bread, broth, and maybe bugs, can feel like comfort when the world outside is unpredictable. You savor the last bite, lean back against the cool wall of your cottage, and sigh. Because for now, you're full. You're alive. And you only mildly smell like turnips. Soon, the chores will resume. Or maybe, just maybe, you'll sneak a moment to play. If the goats allow it. You don't get long to digest your crumbly chunk of rye or your watery beet broth. The day's only just stretching its legs, and you're already being called back into action. Because as a medieval child, you don't just exist, you contribute. And that means labor. Real labor. The kind that leaves dirt under your fingernails and your knees perpetually scabbed. If you're a peasant child, your small body is basically a multi-purpose tool. You're light enough to climb into haylofts, quick enough to chase stray goats, and expendable enough to test whether the frozen pond is safe yet. Spoiler, it isn't. Today, your first task after lunch is helping in the fields. The wheat isn't going to harvest itself, and even if it did, someone would still need to collect the bits that got trampled by the cow. You head out with a handful of siblings, a few cousins, and a sense of impending backache. Your job depends on the season. Spring? You're sowing seeds, scaring off birds, and getting dirt in places you didn't know existed. Summer? You're helping to weed and carry water in jugs that double as medieval kettlebells. Autumn means harvest, your arms ache from swinging sickles and lugging sacks. And winter? That's indoor work, mending nets, twisting straw into ropes, or trying not to freeze near the hearth while pretending to churn butter. Adults like to say you're learning responsibility. You're pretty sure you're just becoming permanently hunched. But here's the thing, there's a weird satisfaction in it. You know your contribution matters. You help bring food to the table. You learn the rhythm of the land. And sometimes, while you're knee-deep in mud and arguing with a stubborn goose, you catch a glimpse of sunlight through the trees and feel oddly peaceful. For noble children, the grind looks different but still very real. If you're a boy of noble blood, around age 7, you're likely sent to serve in another noble household as a page. This is the aristocratic version of an unpaid internship, with a lot more sweeping and slightly fewer bagels. You learn how to serve food, clean armor, and carry messages while standing very straight and trying not to yawn. Your day involves memorizing court etiquette, learning to ride horses without falling off too much, and practicing swordplay with wooden weapons that still manage to leave bruises. Your clothes are better, sure, your shoes even have laces, but you're still at the mercy of cranky knights, wandering tutors, and the overwhelming scent of boiled mutton. If you're a noble girl, your training is just as relentless, just more embroidered. You learn to sew, spin, and manage household accounts. You're taught to play instruments, read religious texts, and walk with a book on your head, which seems less about posture and more about slowly losing your will to live. Historians still argue whether noble girls actually enjoyed this education or just became expert daydreamers. Meanwhile, there are always those other duties no one writes songs about. Emptying chamber pots, sweeping soot, chasing away rats, though honestly, the rats often win. And for peasant kids, the worst task of all, collecting dung. Yes, animal droppings. Not for fun, though some kids do find ways to make it competitive, but for fuel. You gather it in baskets, let it dry, and later it helps keep your one-room cottage from freezing. Romantic, isn't it? Quirky side note, some wealthier homes even hired children to be turnspit boys. Their entire job was to sit in a wheel like a furry hamster and power the rotation of a meat spit over the fire. No, seriously. A whole childhood powered by roast chicken and mild despair. And yet, through it all, you learn. Your body becomes strong. Your hands become capable. Your complaints become strategic, saved only for injuries involving blood or splinters the size of arrows. You share quiet jokes with other kids, race snails when no one's looking, and find joy in small victories, like finding the chicken's secret egg stash or tricking your younger sibling into taking your turn at the butter churn. You're not just working. You're growing, learning, adapting. You figured out how to lift a bucket with one hand, dodge the angry rooster with your eyes closed, and quote half the Bible just to get out of firewood duty. You finish your chores just as the shadows grow long and the sky begins to melt into soft lavender. Your tunic's sweaty. Your feet are filthy. Your arms are sore. But you made it through another half-day of medieval childhood. Now, if you can just avoid being volunteered to help dig the new latrine pit, you might even have time to play before dusk. You've earned it. After hours of hauling, scraping, planting, and probably stepping in something that definitely wasn't a rock, it's finally time to play. And while play in the medieval world might lack plastic packaging or AA batteries, it more than makes up for it in imagination, chaos, and mild bodily harm. You and a ragtag gang of other children bolt from the fields, cottages, or castle halls like wolves finally let off their leashes. No one's setting up a Pinterest-worthy playdate here. This is full throttle, unsupervised, slightly dangerous fun. Your first stop? A clearing, a stream, or maybe the muddy lane between the baker's house and the pigsty. The world is your playground, and no one has told you no running in years. What do you play with? Anything and everything. Sticks become swords. Stones become treasure. If it's vaguely throwable, it's already mid-air. Some kids have makeshift dolls stuffed with straw or carved from wood. Others roll hoops made from iron or chase a ball sewn from leather scraps and optimism. Games vary depending on where you live. In the countryside, it's all about the outdoors. You play blind man's bluff with a scarf over your eyes, trusting that no one leads you into the dung heap. Hoodman blind, as it was sometimes called, is basically tag mixed with betrayal. Other favorites include stool ball, an early relative of cricket, and knucklebones, which involves tossing small animal bones like dice, because nothing says childhood like flinging vertebrae. In towns, street games mix with noise and trouble. You might be hurling cabbage heads down an alley or trying to wrestle a piglet, bonus points if it's not yours. City kids are loud, fast, and endlessly inventive. One kid invents a game where you leap over puddles while singing. Another decides it's a good day to play chicken with the laundry donkey. Spoiler, the donkey wins. If you're lucky enough to be near a festival or market day, the fun multiplies. Jugglers, musicians, and puppet shows appear like magic. You stare, wide-eyed, as a man swallows fire or a dancing bear reluctantly performs for coins. Laughter mixes with the scent of roasted chestnuts and questionable hygiene. Maybe you get a treat, candied nuts or a sugared fig, and you guard it like it's treasure from a dragon's hoard. Noble children play, too, though their games are wrapped in a layer of etiquette and supervision. You might play chess or backgammon indoors while pretending not to cheat. Or practice falconry, if you're lucky enough to have a bird and someone else's hand to clean up after it. You spar with wooden swords in the training yard, trying not to cry when your cousin accidentally hits your knuckles for the third time. Younger noble girls play with elaborately dressed dolls made from cloth and wood, act out scenes from court life, and whisper about which boy looked at whom during prayers. Older girls may already be helping with needlework or quietly eavesdropping on grown-up gossip about who's being married off next Tuesday. Despite the class divide, some things stay the same: scraped knees, stolen turns, and that one kid who always insists the rules changed mid-game. And there's always the looming threat of someone tattling. Peasant kids get yelled at. Noble kids get lectures in Latin. Here's a quirky little tidbit: in some villages, kids were encouraged to make noise to keep the devils away. So yes, that shrieking game of Run from the Fake Ghost might have had holy approval. You're welcome, medieval parents. Historians still argue whether play was truly carefree or just a brief escape between chores. But either way, it mattered. It taught you to strategize, to bond, to laugh until your belly hurt, even if your tunic tore and your best stick broke. As the sun starts to sink and the shadows stretch long, your play winds down. You're sweaty, scraped, and grinning. Maybe someone's crying over a lost game piece. Maybe someone else is insisting they saw a fairy behind the chicken coop. You don't question it. You just walk home, skin warm from the day, hair full of straw, heart still thudding from the last race. Tomorrow, you'll work again. But for now, you've been just a kid. Dirt-streaked. Imaginative. Wild. And in your own little way, undefeated. You may be muddy, scabbed, and still catching your breath from a heated debate about who won the last game of kick the pig bladder ball, but one thing is certain: whether you're a peasant scraping through a dirt-filled childhood or a young noble draped in velvet with an itch from something suspicious in the seams, all medieval children share one essential truth: some kids just have it easier. That's right, tonight we peek behind the thick stone walls and heavy wooden doors of the medieval elite. Let's be honest, being born into nobility was basically winning the medieval lottery. Sure, you might be betrothed before you can spell your own name, and your shoes could double as torture devices, but your porridge is warm, your beds have sheets, and no one's asking you to gather goose droppings. At least not personally. Your day begins in a manor or castle, where the floor isn't just dirt, it's occasionally swept stone. You might even wake up in your own bed, or at least one shared with only one sibling and not 5 cousins. A servant or nursemaid gently nudges you awake, possibly with warm water for washing or a bit of bread to nibble before morning prayers. If you're really lucky, there's honey on it. And that's not just food, it's prestige. But don't mistake this for a lazy day. Oh no. Being a noble child means training for a very specific future. If you're a boy, your path is practically pre-carved. Around age 7, you're shipped off to another lord's household to become a page, which is basically a mix of errand boy, cup filler, and squire in training. It's part education, part social strategy. You learn to recite poetry, polish armor, fetch wine, and keep your mouth shut while nobles complain about land taxes. You spend your days watching your elders, learning courtesy, practicing sword forms, and perfecting the art of standing still without fidgeting. You try on armor that's too big, spar with other boys using wooden swords, and occasionally get knocked down by someone whose father owns significantly more sheep. If you're a noble girl, your training is just as intense, though softer in appearance. Your days are filled with lessons in needlework, music, dancing, and the subtle art of not rolling your eyes during marriage negotiations. You learn French, Latin, or at least how to read prayers aloud, and spend hours stitching tiny birds into pillowcases that may or may not be used by guests who snore. Meals for noble kids are fancier, of course. You don't sit at the high table with the adults, but you do get meat more than once a month, and you've heard of fruit as something more than dried mystery bits. Meals come with bread trenchers, possibly even cheese, and if your lord is feeling generous, a dollop of custard. You eat with manners, of course, because you're watched constantly. A spilled goblet is a lecture. Elbows on the table? That's practically a felony. Leisure time for noble children is both structured and filled with subtle status games. Maybe you're riding horses under supervision, or flying falcons with more attitude than your cousin. You might play chess with someone older, lose, and still have to compliment their strategy. You practice the lute, fail at embroidery, or sneak a sweet from the kitchens and pretend you didn't. Some days, you're invited to observe court proceedings, which is a fancy way of saying watch adults argue in velvet. There are also feasts and pageants. These aren't daily occurrences, but when they happen, you wear your best tunic, sit up straight, and pretend you're not just here for the meat pies. Jugglers, dancers, and acrobats dazzle while you dream of someday being important enough to not have to pretend you like turnip wine. Here's a quirky tidbit: noble children were often dressed like miniature adults. No cartoon dragons or soft cotton pajamas. You're 7, but you're wearing a stiff wool gown, decorative belt, and a hat that looks like it could double as a birdhouse. Historians still argue whether these tiny outfits symbolized maturity or were just a massive misunderstanding of childhood comfort. Of course, not everything is golden goblets and lute lessons. You're constantly under scrutiny, expected to behave with dignity and remember the names of second cousins who live 3 castles away. You learn early that appearances are everything, and one poorly timed tantrum could be reported to your father by lunchtime. You don't run wild through the fields. You walk carefully through the halls, always aware of who's watching. Still, for all the rules, there's comfort. Warm food. Books. Tutors. Even toys made from ivory or silver, if you're fortunate. Your version of hardship is sharing a servant or being told your embroidery needs more rabbits. And yet, noble children long for freedom too. You peek out castle windows and watch the village kids dash barefoot through the mud. You hear laughter echoing from the woods and feel a pang of jealousy. Their games may be rough, their food meager, but they live without constant expectations. Sometimes, you wish you could toss your hat, tear your gown, and chase a hoop down a hill like your world didn't weigh so much already. Because whether noble or not, you're still a child. Curious. Restless. Dreaming. Wondering what comes next and hoping, just hoping, that it involves fewer posture lessons and more honey cakes. Back in the smoky, bookless heart of your village, or the slightly better ventilated chambers of a monastery, you may be facing the one activity that causes universal dread among medieval children, education. Or, as you might call it, the hours of Latin horror and ink-stained fingers. If you're a peasant child, formal education is a bit of a pipe dream. Most of your learning happens through life itself, planting crops, feeding animals, and memorizing the village gossip hierarchy like your brain depends on it. Reading? Writing? Those are for monks, merchants, and the suspiciously literate. But sometimes, just sometimes, a local priest or traveling friar offers lessons to a select few village children. You, chosen either because your parents begged or because you look particularly gullible, get to attend. The classroom is the back room of the church, and the chalkboard is a slab of wood if you're lucky. You're handed a wax tablet and stylus, or if you're very fortunate, a bit of rough parchment and a quill that still smells like goose. You practice your letters under the watchful gaze of a man who smells like candles and penance, and who considers smiling to be a mortal sin. The lesson? Mostly the alphabet, some prayers, and an enthusiastic attempt to beat Latin into your brain. Quite literally, in some cases, corporal punishment is not only allowed but considered motivational. You copy out Ave Maria with painstaking slowness while trying not to sneeze into your ink pot. It's cold, your hand cramps, and you're fairly certain you just conjugated the word to run into something sacrilegious. If you're from a noble family, your educational experience is more elaborate, though not necessarily more fun. You have a tutor? Maybe several. One teaches Latin and rhetoric. Another covers history and theology. A third insists on arithmetic even though you're pretty sure math is just a medieval prank. Lessons start early, just after morning prayers. You sit on a bench, back straight, while a tutor drones on about Charlemagne or the sins of idle hands. You're expected to memorize chunks of scripture, recite poetry in front of stone-faced adults, and write your name in elegant script while a maid reminds you not to chew the quill. Your ink blots look like abstract demons. Sometimes you're rewarded with sweets. Sometimes you're punished with a lecture so long it feels like your ears are melting. And sometimes, this is the best, you're allowed to decorate the margins of your manuscripts. Small animals, faces, and very unholy doodles of monks in embarrassing situations appear beside psalms, proof that even the most angelic child contains mischief. And yes, girls get educated too, at least, noble ones do. While boys might study battle strategy and grammar, girls are trained in reading, embroidery patterns, and occasionally music or estate management. If you're lucky, your family hires a governess who lets you read romances or practice calligraphy by candlelight. If you're not, you get stuck sewing tiny birds for 6 hours straight while someone quizzes you on the lives of saints. Here's a quirky tidbit: some children learn their letters through food. Alphabets carved into bread or shaped from dough made learning tasty and very short-lived. You spell out Gloria, then immediately eat the G because you're starving and also very sick. Meanwhile, the real scholars of your era are tucked inside monasteries. If you're a child training to become a monk, your day begins with pre-dawn prayers. Then comes reading, chanting, copying texts by hand, and occasionally illuminating manuscripts with gold leaf if your hands are steady and your soul sufficiently pure. You chant Latin hymns so often they start leaking into your dreams. Historians still argue whether medieval education was primarily religious brainwashing or a genuine attempt to expand young minds. Truth is, it's probably both. Learning was sacred, yes, but also weaponized. You weren't just being taught to read. You were being taught what to read, how to read it, and most importantly, how to not question it. And yet, even in these rigid routines, curiosity bubbles up. A boy asks why there are 2 creation stories in Genesis. A girl sneaks a look at a forbidden love poem. A monk's apprentice draws a cat wearing a bishop's hat in the corner of a scroll. Learning isn't just surviving lectures, it's finding yourself in the margins. By the time lessons end, your brain feels fried, your fingers are ink-stained, and your legs are stiff from sitting still so long. You stretch, yawn, and wonder if you'll ever use any of this knowledge, besides when you want to impress someone by quoting a proverb you only half understand. But secretly, a small spark has lit inside you. Whether peasant or noble, disciplined or doodler, you now know something you didn't know yesterday. And in a world of superstition, mud, and relentless chores, that feels like a kind of magic. You don't exactly choose this life, but once you're in it, there's no turning back. Around age 7, if you're a boy from noble blood, you're plucked from your home, no matter how much you love your pet falcon or your mother's barley cakes, and sent off to serve as a page in someone else's grand house or castle. Think of it as an elite training program with a touch of forced humility, minimal sleep, and 0 snacks. Your arrival is met with nods and maybe one begrudgingly worn cloak. You're shown to a shared chamber, probably with straw mattresses and a blanket that smells like generations of ambition, and told to be ready before dawn. You're here to serve, someone says. Not to be served. You nod, trying not to look at the horse in the corner giving you side-eye. Life as a page isn't all clapping in court and pretending to be polite. It's a strange balancing act, your nobility, but not that noble. So you serve wine at the table but don't get to sit down. You carry messages but don't read them unless you want to test how far your ears can stretch. And above all, you watch how knights speak, how lords command, how not to spill hot soup on a duke's lap. Your mornings begin with tasks. Lots of them. You polish armor until it blinds you. You sweep stone floors while pretending your knees don't ache. You feed the falcons, brush the horses, and sometimes, if no one's watching, practice sword moves in the stable shadows using a broom. In between, there are lessons. Reading, writing, courtly manners, heraldry. You learn the difference between a banner and a pennon, the lineage of the local baron, and how not to yawn during sermons. You're taught to bow so deeply your nose nearly touches your knees, and to say, "My lord," like you mean it, even when you don't. Sword training comes later. You and the other boys clomp into the yard with wooden weapons, heavy shields, and overconfidence. The instructor is a grizzled veteran with one good eye and 0 patience. He shouts, corrects your grip, and occasionally whacks you on the shoulder with the flat of his blade when you forget to block. You go home with new bruises and a sense of pride. Battle scars, sort of. At mealtime, you serve food. You carry trenchers of meat and bowls of stew, balancing them like your future depends on it, which it kind of does. Drop the bread, and you're cleaning dishes for a week. Spill wine, and you might get reassigned to chicken coop duty. But serve flawlessly, you just might catch the steward's eye. Or better yet, the knight you're secretly hoping will sponsor your training. Now, about the sass, because yes, you're a child, and this life is ripe for sarcasm. You learn to keep it internal. When the Lord's daughter throws her embroidery at your face and calls you clumsy, you imagine her tripping over her own ruff. When your instructor says, again, for the 8th time in the sword yard, you picture him falling into the moat. But you smile. Always smile. There are perks. You attend feasts, standing, of course, but the leftovers are glorious. Roasted meats, bits of tart, honey cakes that crumble like dreams. You sneak bites when no one's looking. You hear stories from wandering minstrels, witness tournaments from the sidelines, and once, you hold the bridle of a warhorse so noble it probably bathes in wine. And there's camaraderie. The other pages become your brothers in arms, sometimes literally, sometimes in squabbles over who stole whose tunic. You share secrets, bruises, and bread crusts. You learn together, suffer together, and dream of the day you'll be promoted to squire, with real armor and a horse of your own. Historians still argue whether the page system was more about genuine training or political hostage-taking. After all, having your son serve in another lord's house is a clever way to ensure peace or mutual blackmail. But for you, it's just your life. Hard, strange, occasionally humiliating, and yet, kind of incredible. You're learning how to stand tall, how to serve without being small, and how to become the knight you've always imagined, honorable, skilled, respected. Even if right now, your biggest accomplishment is not dropping the mutton platter. As night falls and you finally collapse into your itchy straw bed, you stare at the ceiling beams and whisper to yourself, someday. Someday, you'll be the one giving orders. The one charging into battle. The one with a page of your own, nervous, eager, and full of dreams. But for now, you sleep. Because dawn comes fast. And that chicken you were supposed to pluck at sunrise? It's still out there. Waiting. When you're not scrubbing armor or fetching pails of wine, sometimes, just sometimes, your world opens up with color, music, and the sweet, fleeting taste of theatrical nonsense. Because yes, even in the muddy tapestry of medieval life, there's time for fun, especially if it's loud, a little weird, and maybe smells faintly of turnips and sweat. Today, the village is buzzing. Word's out that traveling performers have arrived, and suddenly your chores don't seem quite so urgent. You slip away, trailing behind a group of wide-eyed kids, your heart racing with hope. Maybe they've brought puppets. Maybe music. Maybe, be still your grubby little heart, a dancing goat. You reach the market square, and sure enough, the stage is being set. Or well, a stageish thing. A cart with fold-out panels, bits of cloth, and a guy who looks like he hasn't slept since the last harvest. He's hammering together scenery while his partner pulls on a pig-shaped puppet and starts shouting about sausages. The crowd gathers, peasants, merchants, a few bored-looking nobles, and then the show begins. It's slapstick, rowdy, and exactly what you hoped. The puppet shouts, gets into a brawl with a chicken, loses a wig, and ends the scene by diving into a bucket of flour. It's completely ridiculous and everyone is cackling. These shows aren't high art. They're fast, funny, and filled with just enough mischief to make you look over your shoulder and wonder if the priest is watching. They mock authority, tease superstition, and sometimes, when the grown-ups aren't paying attention, drop in a sly joke about the Baron's bald spot. Between acts, musicians play lively tunes on fiddles and flutes. You clap along, forgetting for a moment that your knees are sore and your chores are half done. Maybe a juggler takes the stage, tossing knives with casual flair while a toddler tries to imitate him using apples. Spoiler, the apples don't survive. And then comes the part that both thrills and unnerves you, the plague play. Yes, you heard that right. Some troupes act out dramatic retellings of the Black Death. There's fake coughing, spooky masks, and dramatic fainting. It's half horror, half comedy, and the adults nod solemnly while the children lean in, fascinated. You might not fully understand it, but you know this, plagues are scary, and this play is somehow making them fun. Historians still argue whether these performances were meant to educate, entertain, or just distract people from their daily grind. Either way, you absorb it all. You laugh. You flinch. You whisper to your friend that the plague actor looks suspiciously like the guy who sells fish behind the mill. Quirky detail of the day? Some towns banned certain plays for being too spicy. Others demanded that every performance end with a moral, usually something about repentance, obedience, or not stealing bread. But in smaller villages, the rules are looser. Today's show ends with a pie fight, 3 pratfalls, and a monk puppet who burps the 10 Commandments. The fun doesn't stop at plays. There's storytelling, too. You gather around a hearth or a village bench, wide-eyed as an old woman spins tales of dragons, saints, and tricksters who steal from the rich and vanish into the woods. Her voice rises and falls like a bard's, weaving images that stick in your mind for days. Noble kids get their own version of entertainment, though it's usually indoors and involves less burping. Troubadours arrive with lutes and poetry. They sing songs of courtly love, epic quests, and knights who battle dragons with perfect hair and tragic backstories. You sit straight, pretending to understand the metaphor while your stomach growls and your younger cousin tries to pick his nose discreetly. Sometimes, the castle hosts masks, elaborate plays where nobles dress in costumes and act out parts. You might be cast as a tree or a silent page, and you do your best not to trip on your own shoes. You marvel at the costumes, the candles, the applause that echoes like thunder in the great hall. But whether you're in a manor or a muddy field, one truth is universal: performance is magic. It breaks the monotony. It sparks your imagination. It lets you laugh at things that usually scare you, like sickness, starvation, or your aunt's unibrow. As the show ends and the crowd begins to scatter, you linger. One of the performers catches your eye and gives you a wink. You grin. For a moment, you imagine running away to join them. Living in a cart, juggling turnips, playing the fool in front of laughing crowds. You imagine freedom. But the illusion fades. You hear your name being called, probably because the firewood isn't going to stack itself. You sigh, take one last look at the puppet stage, and turn back toward home. Still, the songs echo in your ears. The jokes replay in your mind. And as you walk, you're already planning a puppet show of your own, complete with stick figures, your sister's apron, and a potato for dramatic exits. Because in a world of toil and duty, even a flicker of play is enough to light a fire that lasts all week. You're humming a tune from the puppet show, still half grinning at the memory of the monk puppet's tragic pie accident, when your mother calls you back to the cottage with a tone that brooks no argument. Fun time is over. It's evening now, the light is fading, and your energy, while still chaotic, is about to be redirected. Because guess what? Tonight, you're singing. Not for fun. For supper. In many medieval households, especially in villages and small towns, community singing wasn't just a pastime, it was part of your spiritual and social education. Especially if you were within earshot of a church bell, chances are someone would rope you into a choir. Congratulations, you're now one of God's smallest, muddiest minstrels. You trudge to the chapel, still smelling faintly of turnip stew and barn, and join a chorus of other reluctant voices. Boys and girls of various ages shuffle onto wooden benches, yawning, elbowing, and whispering before the cantor silences you all with one raised eyebrow and a throat clear that sounds like divine judgment. The music begins. Gregorian chant, if you're lucky. A kind of holy drone that requires no rhythm, no dancing, and absolutely no joy. You try to follow the lead, your voice cracking halfway through Kyrie eleison, which, fun fact, you think means Lord, have mercy, but may also mean please end this rehearsal. Your voice is thin, uncertain. But slowly, it blends into the others. The stone walls echo. The candles flicker. Something ancient stirs in your chest. The music, dry as it may be, carries a strange weight, like time stretching backward through every child who's ever stood exactly where you are, knees knocking, voice wavering, heart somewhere between awe and boredom. Singing isn't just for prayers. Sometimes, it's practical. Harvest songs, work chants, lullabies. Your mother hums while kneading bread. Your father sings to the oxen when he's in a good mood, which is approximately every third Thursday. Music marks the rhythm of life. And whether you're belting out hymns or just humming to yourself while stirring porridge, you're part of a long, musical tradition. And sometimes, when you're lucky, music gets fun. On feast days, the whole village sings. You don't even need a reason. Maybe it's St. Crispin's Day, or maybe the miller just finally fixed that weird creaking noise in the grindstone. Whatever the excuse, people gather with ale, instruments, and voices that range from angelic to "please stop." Children are encouraged to join in, especially if you can carry a tune or at least not actively ruin one. You learn old ballads, ridiculous rhymes, and call and response songs that sometimes verge on inappropriate if you think about the lyrics too hard. Spoiler, don't think about the lyrics too hard. And if you're from a noble household, singing is still very much on the agenda, but with rules. You might be taught courtly songs in multiple languages, each one with more verses than anyone asked for. You sing before guests, in the chapel, during lessons. If you have a good voice, you're paraded around like a prized canary. If you don't, well, you're still expected to try. Just a little quieter. Girls are often praised for sweet, high voices. Boys, especially those headed for choir school, might find their voices rapidly pushed to the edge of human tolerance. And heaven help you when your voice starts to crack. Suddenly your angelic soprano becomes a wobbly frog sound, and your tutor winces every time you open your mouth. But here's a quirky little twist: if you were exceptionally talented, like make the priest cry talented, you might be sent to a monastery school with a real choir program. There, you'd be fed, clothed, and taught music theory in exchange for hours of singing. It's a fair trade if you like chanting and cold stone floors. Historians still debate how much children actually enjoyed all this singing. Was it an uplifting community experience? Or a mildly traumatic test of endurance disguised as music appreciation? Probably both. But one thing's certain: your voice mattered. It was a way to connect to your peers, your elders, your faith, and occasionally to the friar who promised extra bread to anyone who hit the right pitch. Tonight, as your choir practice ends and you step back into the cool air, the stars are just beginning to wink into view. Your voice is hoarse, your stomach is rumbling, and someone behind you is still humming the final hymn off key. You walk home slowly, the melody still dancing in your mind. And when you sit down to supper, another bowl of pottage, surprise, there's something warm in your chest. Maybe it's pride. Maybe it's the lingering hum of shared song. Or maybe it's just indigestion. Either way, you've sung for your supper. And tomorrow, you'll probably do it again. Dinner's over, your fingers still sticky with mystery broth, and the fire's crackling in the hearth like it has opinions. You should be winding down, maybe curling up with your woven doll or a stick shaped like a sword, but instead, chaos. Because nothing, absolutely nothing, brings out your true medieval spirit quite like sibling rivalry. Whether you're one of 2 or one of 12, the evening hours are prime time for squabbles, whispered threats, and barnyard diplomacy. Your youngest brother just stuck a feather up your nose and ran away cackling. Your older sister is hogging the stool closest to the fire like she's Queen of England. She's not. And your cousin, who technically doesn't live here but somehow always is here, is trying to trade you a half-eaten turnip for your blanket. It's war. Peasant homes are small, cramped, and shared by more humans than any fire was meant to warm. Privacy is a myth. Silence is rare. You sleep side by side, argue over scraps, and navigate every interaction like a tiny, barefoot politician. You learn fast. Tattling is a high-stakes game. Go too often, and your parents start ignoring you. Not enough, and that chicken egg you were saving for tomorrow ends up mysteriously cracked in someone else's hands. So, you master the art of the quiet revenge. Hide their shoes. Replace their stew with an extra spicy mystery root. Lock eyes from across the room and promise vengeance in the most dramatic whisper you can muster. But medieval children aren't monsters. Most of the time. There's also affection, loyalty, and a weirdly efficient system of alliances. You defend your siblings in public even if you spent the whole afternoon threatening to bury them with turnip peelings. You take turns watching the baby, play tag until your legs give out, and huddle together when the roof creaks ominously in the wind. You're part of a unit, dysfunctional, maybe, but unbreakable. And don't forget your other constant companions, the animals. Chickens inside the house, pigs rooting just outside, a cat that might be divine or demonic depending on its mood. They're part of the family too. You name them. You chase them. You accidentally step on them and get pecked for your sins. One of your weirdest friendships might be with a particularly unhinged goose who seems to think it's the family guard dog. Every morning it charges you. Every evening, you throw it a crust of bread and whisper a truce. Historians still argue whether medieval children truly bonded with their livestock or just learned to avoid the ones with grudges. Noble children, meanwhile, have sibling drama in bigger rooms. You argue over who gets the good seat at dinner, who the new tutor likes best, and who gets to ride the second best pony, because the best pony obviously belongs to your oldest brother who won't share. You write notes, deliver them via servants, and sometimes stage entire passive-aggressive puppet shows to get your point across. Your sisters steal your ribbons. Your brothers steal your thunder. One time you tried to impress everyone with a song you learned, only for your cousin to accidentally pour ink on your sleeve halfway through the chorus. You didn't forget. You never forget. But there's also shared laughter, even among velvet-clad siblings. You sneak treats together from the kitchens. You conspire during long church services to fake stomach aches. You whisper in candlelit corners about who's secretly betrothed, who got scolded by the steward, and which visiting night has a nose like a potato. Your kids. Rich, poor, or somewhere between. And kids, as they always have, create their own world within the larger one, a world where rules bend, alliances shift, and drama unfolds with the intensity of an epic poem and the maturity of a pie fight. As night deepens and the candles burn low, you might be ordered to say evening prayers with your siblings, a process that mostly involves elbowing each other during the Amen. Then it's off to sleep. Or what passes for sleep in a world where snoring, fidgeting, and the occasional dream-induced shout are all part of the bedtime soundtrack. You pull your blanket, thin, scratchy, and slightly damp, up over your chin, and try not to think about how cold your feet are. Your brother mumbles something in his sleep. Your sister sighs dramatically, even while unconscious. And you smile. Because love in a medieval household is loud, messy, and occasionally involves someone throwing a chicken bone at your head. But it's love. Real. Wild. Unfiltered. The kind of love that only forms when you've shared chores, secrets, and a single spoon for 4 days. You drift off not to silence, but to the soft rustle of hay, the low snore of a parent, and your sister whispering one last threat about tomorrow's chores. Good night, little diplomat. Sleep while the alliance still holds. You wake to the distant clang of bells and the unmistakable scent of wood smoke and boiled onions, but something's different today. The air practically vibrates with excitement. Your mother's braiding her hair with extra care. Your father's trimmed his beard, which only happens under extreme circumstances, like feast days, funerals, or when the bishop is visiting. You sit up on your straw mat and blink, it's a festival day. Now, if you're imagining a quaint little fair with tidy booths and perfectly baked pies, dial your expectations back about 6 centuries. Medieval festivals were glorious chaos, noisy, crowded, and absolutely the best day of the year if you didn't mind the occasional accidental elbow to the face. You rush through your chores, spilling chicken feed in your haste, and barely even protest when asked to help scrub the soot off your cheeks. You even wear your good tunic, less patched, still smells like turnip, but marginally less itchy. Everyone in the village is doing the same, kids and adults buzzing like bees preparing for something joyful and mildly dangerous. Feast days could be religious or seasonal. Maybe it's the feast of Saint Martin. Maybe it's midsummer. Maybe someone high-ranking didn't die, and that's worth celebrating. Whatever the reason, today's the day for music, meat, and minor injuries. First, there's church. Because you can't start a day of holy chaos without a proper nod to heaven. You stand through the sermon, fidgeting beside your siblings while the priest drones on about virtue, humility, and not drinking too much later. Spoiler, everyone will drink too much later. Then, finally, the festivities begin. The town square transforms. Booths appear, selling pies that crumble at the touch, cheese wheels that double as missiles, and sweetmeats that somehow manage to be sticky and dry at the same time. Children dart between carts, eyes wide at the sights, jugglers tossing knives, fire breathers sizzling eyebrows, and one man walking on stilts and yelling about pig races. Yes, pig races. You and your friends crowd the makeshift track, cheering for the snorting contestants like their royal steeds. You scream encouragement at Piggy Smalls, the local favorite, as he waddles his way to glory, only to be distracted mid-race by a suspicious pile of cabbage. Next up, the maypole. Ribbons are handed out, and you join the spiraling dance with the precision of an overexcited goat. You trip, laugh, untangle yourself, and somehow end up tied to your cousin. That's fine. That's normal. That's festival life. And oh, the food. The adults roast a whole pig, an actual pig, not a symbolic one, and the scent alone could bring a tear to your eye. There's bread, honey cakes, even apples dipped in something sticky that might be honey or might be a medieval experiment gone rogue. You grab a handful of roasted chestnuts and immediately burn your tongue. Worth it. At some point, the dancing starts. Not the elegant waltzes of noble courts, but stompy, rhythmic group dances with clapping, shouting, and occasional toe stomping. You join in, arms flailing, feet pounding, heart full. You don't know all the steps, but no one does. It's not about grace. It's about joy. Of course, not everything is idyllic. Someone falls off a barrel. Someone else tries to juggle flaming torches and drops one in the soup. Your little sister eats 3 honey cakes and spends the next hour claiming she's turning into a bee. The local drunk tries to unwrestle a priest and loses spectacularly. You love every minute. Noble children experience their own version of a festival, less pig wrestling, more pageantry. You watch from raised platforms or castle balconies, dressed in fine clothes you're afraid to stain. There are plays, dances, and tournaments. Knights charge at each other with lances while the crowd roars. You clutch your ribbons, hoping your favorite wins, and try not to let the roasted almond crumbs land on your lap. Sometimes you're invited to participate in tableaux vivants, fancy frozen scenes meant to impress visiting nobility. You stand perfectly still, dressed as a woodland nymph or a Roman goddess, while your nose itches and your brother whispers that your wig's crooked. It's awkward, but you'll remember it forever. Quirky festival fact: some towns held Feast of Fools days where children got to dress as bishops or mayors and rule for a few hours. You might wear a paper crown, sit in a decorated chair, and order your friends to fetch more pie. It's hilarious until someone takes it too seriously and tries to tax the chickens. Historians still debate whether these festivals were more about religion or distraction. But to you, they're pure magic. A break from chores, a celebration of life, a reminder that joy can still erupt in a world of mud and struggle. As night falls, torches are lit. Shadows dance across the square. Music plays on. You lie in the grass, head in your sister's lap, feet aching, face sticky with sugar and triumph. The stars peek out. The pig snores nearby. And you, dear child, are utterly, gloriously content. After the festivities fade and your dreams have been stuffed with dancing pigs and burnt chestnuts, life inevitably settles back into its slower, scratchier routine. But tonight, as you drift off on your usual straw bundle, there's a different kind of hush in the room. It's the night before the local pilgrimage begins, and whether you're thrilled, terrified, or just hoping for better snacks along the way, you're going. Now, for medieval children, a pilgrimage isn't just a long walk. It's a sacred journey, an excuse to miss chores, and a logistical nightmare if you're under the age of 10 and prone to blisters. Still, it's a big deal. Pilgrimages are how you show devotion, earn divine favor, and occasionally pick up a blessed souvenir. The morning begins with frantic packing, which mostly involves stuffing bags with crusty bread, cheese hard enough to qualify as weaponry, and a relic or two, not your job to verify authenticity. You're given the usual warnings: stay close, don't talk to strangers unless they're obviously saints, and no wrestling the other pilgrims, especially not near bridges. You join the cluster of villagers moving as one, some barefoot, some with shoes that gave up months ago. At the front is the local priest, clutching a staff and looking suspiciously determined. Behind him, a donkey carrying the village banner, 2 kids with bells, and your neighbor's baby goat who refused to stay behind. The road is long and weird. At first, you're excited. You march with exaggerated dignity, quoting psalms you barely remember and imagining yourself as a holy warrior on a noble quest. You swing your walking stick like a sword, poke your cousin by accident, and pretend every puddle is a sacred test of courage. By midday, the fantasy unravels. Your feet hurt. Your bread has developed new, unwelcome textures. Someone keeps singing off-key. And your cousin, who you've now sworn to never speak to again, is hogging the water skin like he discovered it himself. Still, the scenery shifts. You pass through forests echoing with bird calls, cross stone bridges covered in moss, and hear stories of miracles said to have happened just over the next hill. There's always a next hill. And it's always taller than the last. You stop at roadside shrines, each one with a statue more chipped than the last. The priest leads prayers. You mumble along, staring at a bee hovering near your eyebrow. Occasionally, you see other groups, pilgrims from neighboring towns, some cheerful, some blistered, one dragging a cart held together with string and regret. If you're lucky, the destination is somewhere grand, a cathedral with tall spires and stained glass that makes your eyes go wide. Maybe it's the shrine of a saint famous for curing fevers, or a relic said to be a piece of the true cross, or a chicken feather that belonged to Saint Clement's pet, depending on the level of skepticism in your family. You light a candle. You kneel on the cold stone floor. You try to feel something other than leg cramps. And as the incense swells and the choir sings, something strange happens. You do feel something. Maybe not holy fire or divine revelation, but connection. Or the weight of centuries. You, a small muddy child with tired feet, are part of something vast. For noble children, pilgrimage looks slightly less like a struggle session and more like an awkward holiday. You travel on horseback or in a cart cushioned with wool, surrounded by guards and servants. You stop at abbeys, where monks feed you and raise one eyebrow at your fussy appetite. You carry tokens, rings, ribbons, bits of script, to be blessed at the shrine. Your tutors make you write about the experience in Latin, which slightly ruins the magic. You're watched constantly, no poking the relics, no talking to barefoot children, and definitely no swordplay in the chapel. You behave because your parents said this journey is for your soul, and possibly for networking, which sounds suspiciously like finding someone to marry you. Still, it's memorable. The chanting, the candles, the strange hush of holy places where even your loudest cousin goes quiet. You might not understand everything, but you feel the importance. You feel something. Quirky tidbit for the day: some children walked pilgrimages carrying wax models of their ailments. Got a bad leg? You bring a wax leg. Headaches? A wax head. Then you leave it at the shrine in hopes the saint takes the hint. Medieval medicine meets arts and crafts. Historians still argue whether pilgrimage was more about faith, tradition, or a desperate excuse to escape the fields for a week. But for you, it's all of it. A break from routine. A chance to be part of something bigger. An adventure, even with blisters. As you return home, dustier, holier, and low-key traumatized by that one outhouse incident, you carry more than souvenirs. You carry stories, images, a candle stub you're probably not supposed to have taken. You carry the memory of chanting voices echoing in stone halls, of walking mile after mile and realizing just how strong your little legs really are. And when your mother asks you how it was, you grin and say, "It was long." But in your heart, you know it was also something else. Something worth remembering. You've survived another pilgrimage, your feet look like they lost a bar fight with a gravel road, and your souvenir wax leg is melting ominously near the hearth. Still, you feel proud. Braver. Holier, even, at least until your little brother smears goose fat on your tunic and insists it was an accident. But your spiritual growth must take a back seat, because tonight something equally thrilling and mildly terrifying is happening, a storytelling night. Now, don't expect plush blankets and a curated shelf of illustrated hardcovers. This is medieval storytelling, and it comes wrapped in firelight, breathy voices, and a healthy dose of "is that shadow supposed to be moving?" The grown-ups call everyone to gather. You all sit cross-legged on packed dirt or rush mats, the fire crackling like a creature with opinions. The adults are ready to speak, but first, snacks. Not many. A bit of toasted oat cake, maybe a roasted turnip if someone was feeling generous. You chew quietly, waiting. And then the stories begin. The first voice rises, gravelly and calm. A tale of brave saints and fire-breathing dragons. Of knights who rescue maidens, or sometimes the other way around. Of cursed villages, talking wolves, and once, a particularly clever hedgehog who outwits a dishonest merchant. That one's your favorite. The storyteller isn't reading from a book. She's reciting from memory, her voice dipping and climbing, eyes glinting like a cat who knows too much. She paces slightly, gestures wide, and makes dramatic pauses that leave your heart thumping. You know she's told these stories before, but it doesn't matter. You still lean forward when the night approaches the dark cave. You still shiver when the shadowy figure appears at the chapel door. Storytelling nights are community glue. They teach you morals, history, and survival tips disguised as fables. You learn which plants are sacred, which kings were terrible, and that one weird tale about a ghost that only haunts people who steal cheese. You file that one away, just in case. You also hear tales of real history, though slightly more dramatic. The Battle of Hastings becomes a clash of giants. Richard the Lionheart tames actual lions. Joan of Arc talks to angels with swords made of starlight. Historians still argue where the truth ends and the bedtime fantasy begins. But for you, it's all real. It's all possible. Some stories are funny. You laugh until your side hurts over the trickster who dresses as a goose to crash a wedding, or the monk who mistakes a cow's moo for divine inspiration. Medieval humor is slapstick, pun-heavy, and occasionally involves bodily functions, because some things never change. Then come the ghost stories. Oh, yes. No medieval night is complete without tales of spirits, phantoms, and headless monks who wander the forest looking for their lost sandals. Your uncle claims he once saw a banshee combing her hair by the river. Your cousin insists the barn is haunted by a cow that died during a solar eclipse. You don't believe them, but also you're definitely sleeping closer to the hearth tonight. Storytelling isn't limited to peasants. Noble households have their own version, more polished, but just as captivating. You sit in a hall, candles flickering, while a bard or court storyteller performs. Maybe he sings. Maybe he acts out scenes. Maybe he wears a hat that's doing way too much. You sit straight, sip your watered wine, and hang on every word. Tales for nobles often focus on virtue, courtly love, or epics like The Song of Roland or Beowulf. They're longer, more poetic, and full of speeches about honor that make your siblings roll their eyes. Still, you love them. Especially the battles. Especially the monsters. Quirky tidbit for tonight: in some towns, children were encouraged to make up their own tales during storytelling nights. One boy in Normandy famously created a whole saga about a potato that became king. It didn't make historical records, but the village talked about it for weeks. You're not just listening to stories. You're absorbing them. They seep into your dreams. They shape how you see the world. The forest becomes a place where fairies duel and wolves recite riddles. The stars become eyes of gods watching from above. That hollow log you found yesterday? Definitely cursed treasure inside. Historians agree that storytelling was one of the most powerful tools for teaching and preserving culture in the Middle Ages. But for you, it's even more than that. It's connection. It's comfort. It's laughter and fear shared around a fire when the wind moans outside and the darkness presses close. As the last tale ends, something about a knight turned into a frog who only speaks Latin. You sit quietly, warmed from the inside out. Your eyelids droop. Your mouth still smiles. Someone throws another log on the fire. Sparks leap, stories lingering in the smoke. And as you crawl into your corner, wrapping your threadbare blanket around your shoulders, you whisper the start of a new tale into the darkness, just for yourself. Because tomorrow, you're going to tell your story. And it's going to be legendary. Morning comes with the usual symphony of clanking pots, snoring siblings, and someone stepping directly on your hand. But there's an extra rustle today, an unusual kind of energy stirring just outside your door. You rub your eyes, tug on your tunic, and shuffle to the window, only to see a small group gathering near the village edge. They're strangers, travelers, traders, and with them, a cart. A glorious, squeaky-wheeled cart overflowing with stuff. For a medieval child, market day, or even a random visit from traveling traders, isn't just a change in routine. It's a sensory overload, a fashion show, and a crash course in economic negotiation all rolled into one. You beg your parents to let you come along. They agree, mostly because they know you're one loose chicken away from trying to follow the traders on your own. So you walk beside them, wide-eyed, heart-thumping, clutching your one copper coin like it's a key to the entire universe. The market, or makeshift one, since this could be just 3 carts and a rug, is already a carnival of sights and smells. Fabrics from distant towns flutter like flags in the breeze. Bright ribbons, tin cups, honeyed nuts, hand-carved toys, and soap that smells suspiciously floral, it's all here, tempting you with its glitter and novelty. You circle the toy cart first. A wooden knight with a painted shield. A spinning top carved with lazy swirls. A stuffed animal that's either a bear or a deeply confused dog. You don't care. You want it all. But you only have 1 coin. Time to make impossible choices and haggle like your next meal depends on it. Haggle might be a generous term. You mostly point, mumble, and hold up your coin with a look of such deep yearning the trader sighs and knocks off a halfpenny. Victory. Meanwhile, your parents are doing actual business. Trading eggs for salt. Selling woven baskets. Negotiating hard over a second-hand kettle that may or may not have survived a fire. You watch, learning the subtle art of medieval bartering. Never show your eagerness, always pretend there's a better option 2 carts down, and know when to walk away dramatically. Noble children don't get to barter in person. That would be common. Instead, they're brought items by servants or go to markets under heavy supervision, like tiny royalty in training. You walk past stalls pretending not to care, even though the silk ribbons and ginger candies are clearly calling your name. You're taught to observe, not engage, unless it's to point at something and say, "That one," while your tutor frowns disapprovingly. Still, there's excitement. A market is one of the few times the outside world actually comes to you. Exotic fabrics, spices, new instruments, even a man who claims to have a feather from a griffin, he doesn't. You file it all away for later storytelling. Back in the village, a performer appears, because where there's a market, there's a show. He juggles knives, or maybe cabbages if he's had a bad day. He tells jokes in 3 languages, only one of which you understand. You laugh anyway. Another traveler sings songs with a portable harp. You're not entirely sure if he's selling music or just looking for free lunch, but you don't care. The sound of the harp lingers like magic. Some traders have maps. Real, drawn maps. You and a few other kids crowd around, tracing the faded lines with trembling fingers. Cities you've only heard of in stories. Rivers that look like snakes. Mountains named after saints, monsters, or both. One trader points to a faraway land and says he's been there. You believe him. Why wouldn't you? Here's a quirky tidbit. Medieval fairs sometimes included exotic animals as attractions. You might pay a whole coin just to see a dancing bear, a monkey in a hat, or a goose that's allegedly cursed. The goose mostly looks confused, but you're impressed anyway. As the sun climbs, your coin long spent and your arms wrapped around your new treasure, a spinning top, a piece of sugared fruit, or maybe just a particularly smooth rock, you start to fade. Market days are thrilling, but they're exhausting too. So much noise, so many people. So many smells, some better left unnamed. Historians still debate how influential these village markets were on medieval communities. Did they connect people to the broader world? Did they reinforce social divides? Did they really sell griffin feathers? You don't care. You just know it was exciting. Real. Alive. As the traders pack up and the carts roll away, the village settles again. People return to their routines. The excitement fades like smoke. But you hold your prize tightly, whatever it is, and whisper to yourself, next time, I'm getting the puppet. Because there's always a next time. And until then, you'll spin your top or nibble your candied nut or show your rock to every mildly interested chicken, and dream of faraway places that just might be real. Your new treasure, whether it's a tin whistle or a rock shaped suspiciously like a duck, is safely tucked into your sleeping mat. But today, there's no time to admire it. Because just as the village roosters start their daily performance, loud, off-key, relentless, your uncle bursts in and says the words every medieval child knows to fear, "We're butchering the pig today." Cue the silent scream. Now, don't get squeamish on me. In the medieval world, animals weren't pets. They were walking larders. When a pig met its destiny, it was a big deal. It meant fresh meat, rendered fat, cured sausages, and absolutely no part going to waste, including the bits you'd probably rather not think about before breakfast. You're dragged outside, your boots barely tied, to witness the culinary chaos. The pig, until recently known as Old Grunter, has been fattened for months. He's large, loud, and not exactly thrilled with today's itinerary. Your job? Stand back. Don't get in the way. Maybe hold a bucket. Try not to cry. It's over fast. Quicker than you expect. And while it's not pleasant, everyone acts like it's normal, because it is. The pig is cleaned, hung, and quartered. Steam rises in the chilly air. You try to look brave, even as your stomach does a full somersault and a half. Then comes the part where you help. Not because you're especially skilled with sharp tools, but because there's too much work and not enough hands. You hold things. Stir pots. Grind herbs. Someone hands you a long coil of cleaned intestine with instructions to make sausage ropes. You don't ask questions. You just nod and focus very hard on not breathing through your nose. It's messy, smelly, and strangely satisfying. The adults work with practiced speed. Lard is rendered. Blood is saved for pudding. Bones are cracked, tongues are weighed, and someone starts bragging about how last year's ham cured so well it scared off a raccoon. You get a break eventually, long enough to sit on a barrel, chew some bread, and listen to the grown-ups talk about salt ratios and whether the weather will ruin the meat drying. Then you're back on your feet, carrying trays, scrubbing knives, learning by doing. You'll remember all of it, especially the bit where your cousin tried to sneak off with a pig's ear for decoration and got caught. Noble children don't do this, of course. If you're highborn, your meat comes pre-butchered by someone else's hands. But you might still learn where it comes from, especially if your family prides itself on noble rusticity, aka pretending to be country folk for an afternoon. You might observe a deer being dressed in the castle yard after a hunt, watching in mild horror as your father explains which organs are best for pies. You might tour the kitchens and see half a boar on a spit. And you absolutely know which meats are allowed on which holy days, because someone will quiz you during supper. But even among nobility, there's a fascination with the process. Curing, smoking, spicing. Preparing meat for winter wasn't just survival, it was status. If your ham didn't smell like cloves and smoke by Candlemas, were you even trying? Quirky tidbit: some medieval families used pig bladders as balloons. You read that right. After the butchering, kids would inflate the bladder and toss it around like the world's worst party favor. It bounced. It bobbed. It sometimes exploded. And it was hilarious. Until someone got hit in the eye. You're back outside now, helping hang meat to cure. The air smells like ash and salt. Stringy ropes of sausage twist above your head. Your hands are raw, your sleeves stained, your boots now permanently pig-scented. But you're proud. You helped turn one animal into weeks, maybe months, of food. Historians still debate how involved children really were in the butchering process. Some think you mostly watched. Others argue you were up to your elbows in guts by age 6. Either way, you were there. You saw. You learned. And now you understand just how much work goes into surviving winter. As the sun dips low and the final pieces are salted and stacked, your family gathers around the fire. You eat stew, today, thick and rich with the first taste of fresh meat. It's delicious. You don't ask what part it came from. You stretch your sore arms, lean against your sister, and let the warmth sink in. It's been a long, strange day. You're exhausted, but stronger, wiser, smelling faintly of smoked pork. And as you drift to sleep, your dreams are full of sausages, dancing bladders, and one suspicious raccoon wearing a ham helmet. You wake the next day with the lingering scent of smoke in your hair and a distinct grease spot on your tunic that refuses to explain itself. But there's no time to dwell on personal hygiene. Today, it's back to the grind. Literally. Because guess where you're going? To the mill. Now, if you're imagining a charming windmill from a picture book, turn the dial back a few centuries. Your village mill is a stone structure tucked beside a stream, its wooden wheel creaking as it spins, powered by flowing water and the collective hope that this batch of grain won't be eaten by rats or cursed by a vengeful spirit. You're not here just to stare. You're hauling a sack of grain nearly as big as you. Your arms are trembling, your back already regrets being part of this mission, and you're 90% sure something inside the sack is moving. You trudge the path to the mill, dodging puddles and that one suspicious goat that keeps trying to eat your hood. The miller greets you with a nod and a grunt, both of which may be compliments. He's covered in flour, speaks like he swallowed a bag of gravel, and operates the place like a wizard of dust and gear work. You hand over your grain. He inspects it, bites a single kernel for dramatic effect, and then lets you watch as he pours it into the hopper. Inside, it's loud. Stone grinds against stone. Wood creaks. Flour dust floats in the air like a ghost with a gluten allergy. You sneeze approximately 47 times. The millstone spins with methodical might, powered by the water wheel outside. It's hypnotic, rhythmic, strangely beautiful. You're fascinated. It's like watching magic turn wheat into white powder, only it smells like bread and makes your nose itch. You're allowed to peek underneath, just for a second, at the grinding stones. You nod wisely, as if you understand the mechanism, You don't. But it's still cool. Then comes the best part, waiting. Waiting at the mill is its own social event. Other kids are there, also waiting on grain. You swap gossip, throw pebbles at a target carved into the mill wall, and try not to inhale more flour than strictly necessary. Someone challenges you to a sneezing contest. Someone else tries to catch a mouse with a sack and nearly knocks over a whole barrel of rye. Back home, your grain will be used for everything: porridge, bread, beer, if you're an adult, and once, that one experiment where someone tried to make pancakes and set the griddle on fire. But it all starts here. Noble families don't usually visit the mill personally. That would involve lifting things and mingling with people who have dirt under their fingernails. Instead, they send servants with precise orders. Only the finest flour, they say, as if the mill has a secret VIP setting. But some noble children still learn how it works. You're shown diagrams, maybe even a private tour of the estate mill. You get to press your gloved finger against the flour and say something insightful like, "How quaint." Then you run off to the kitchens and beg the cook to bake something with it immediately. Here's your quirky grainy tidbit of the day. Some millers were accused of sorcery. Their mills were loud, mysterious, and always moving. Plus, they got to keep a portion of everyone's grain as payment, leading many villagers to suspect they were hiding something. Spoiler, it was usually just extra flour. Or cheese. Historians still debate whether the milling system was fair or feudal exploitation wrapped in flour-dusted charm. But regardless, it was vital. No mill, no bread. No bread, no energy. No energy, no way to haul more grain. Back at the village, you return triumphant. Your sack is lighter, your arms feel like overcooked noodles, and you now look like a powdered donut. Your mother clucks at the flour in your eyebrows but secretly beams at the fresh bag of ground grain. Soon, you'll be elbow deep in dough, kneading alongside your siblings, or poking the fire while the bread bakes to golden brown perfection. The smell fills the house. You sneak a corner when no one's looking. It burns your tongue. Worth it. As you curl up that night, still coughing faintly from residual flour inhalation, you realize you've learned something important. Magic doesn't always look like dragons or glowing swords. Sometimes, it's water turning wheels, wheels grinding stone, and stone transforming wheat into the stuff of life. And sometimes, it's just the joy of knowing tomorrow's breakfast will be hot, fresh, and hopefully free of mysterious sack dwellers. The morning fog is still hugging the village like a particularly needy ghost when your aunt rouses you with a sharp nudge and a whisper, "It's washing day." You blink, still dreaming of bread and puppet shows, and then the dread hits. Washing day. Otherwise known as medieval soap opera, laundry edition. Now, before you get any fancy ideas about soap suds and lavender-scented bubbles, let's set the record straight. Washing clothes in the Middle Ages is less a chore and more a feat of brute force, advanced squatting, and a tolerance for water so cold it might just be judgmental. First comes water, fetching it, that is. You and your siblings carry heavy buckets from the stream, sloshing half the contents on your boots and arguing the entire way about who's carrying more. Back at the washing spot, a large flat stone by the stream or a wooden tub near the hearth, the process begins. The water is dumped. Soapwort or lye is added. If you're from a well-off family, maybe even a chunk of actual soap appears, though it smells suspiciously like ashes and something that once moved. The clothes, They've been waiting, piled up like a tower of sin in the corner of the cottage, full of soot, sweat, and every dinner mishap from the past 2 weeks. You start with the least horrifying garments. Undergarments come last, because frankly, no one wants to deal with those without a deep sigh and a prayer. You scrub hard against a washboard or rock, knuckles red, arms aching. You slap the fabric into the water with a vigor that could scare away spirits. You rinse, repeat, mutter curses you're not supposed to know, and pretend it doesn't feel like your fingers are turning into icicles. It's not just laundry, it's a full body workout followed by a frostbite tutorial. And yes, children are expected to help. Especially because your small hands are ideal for wringing out those tiny but deceptively dense linen caps and socks. You wring, twist, shake, and hope nothing important tears. If you're lucky, it's sunny. Clothes are hung on bushes, wooden racks, or strung lines. They flap in the breeze like tiny surrender flags. If it's not sunny, you hang them indoors and hope the smoke from the fire does something besides make them smell like bacon. Laundry days also mean gossip. As you scrub beside your mother, aunt, or the neighbor who never whispers, you hear everything. Who's courting whom? Who accidentally fed a relic to a goat? Which child was seen kissing the smith's apprentice behind the chapel? It's like the village newsletter, only wetter and louder. Noble children, you ask? Well, let's be clear, they do not do laundry. The only thing they're washing is their hands, possibly, before meals. Their clothes are cared for by laundresses, who carry the garments away and return them a day later, magically fresh. But even nobles know the agony of washing day indirectly. You might overhear your maid complaining about soap prices or how your velvet tunic took 3 hours to demud after you fell accidentally into a puddle chasing a frog. You're not immune to the consequences of laundry, it just happens in the background like stagehands in a very damp play. Here's a quirky fact. Medieval folks believed certain days were luckier for washing than others. Some even avoided doing laundry on Fridays for fear it would anger the Virgin Mary. Others insisted that washing at night risked summoning spirits. You, personally, think the real ghost is the chill that seeps into your bones by the second bucket. Historians still argue how often medieval people really washed their clothes. Some suggest weekly for the essentials. Others say monthly, with a prayer. What's certain is that laundry was labor. You didn't just toss your tunic into a magic box and press delicate. You scrubbed until your fingers went numb and the fabric begged for mercy. By late afternoon, your arms are jelly. Your face is splattered. Your knees have gone to sleep. But the clothes are clean, or at least cleaner. You breathe in the damp, smoky freshness and feel a weird sense of accomplishment. Like you've conquered a tiny textile war. You help fold and stack. You hang one last tunic. And then you sit, shivering slightly, beside the fire, cradling your blistered hands and sipping broth. You've earned it. As the night falls and the drying linens sway like ghosts in the breeze, you curl up in your least filthy tunic and smile. Because nothing, not even puppet shows or pig bladders, compares to the feeling of slipping into something almost clean after a day of medieval laundry battle. After surviving washing day with your fingers intact, barely, you'd think the universe might reward you with a slow morning. But no. The sky's just lightening when the door creaks open and your father announces, "We're heading to the fields." Now, you already know what this means. Your legs ache preemptively. Your shoulders start to sulk. And that one blister on your palm from the washboard, it's already planning to file a complaint. But off you go, clutching a hunk of cheese and a chunk of bread as your breakfast, trailing behind the adults toward the fields where your family grows barley, oats, maybe even a stubborn patch of rye if the soil behaved this year. For medieval peasant children, fieldwork isn't optional. It's an essential part of life, a seasonal rhythm that dictates not just survival, but how much bread you'll have next winter. You learn the cycles early, sowing in spring, weeding in summer, harvesting in autumn, praying in winter that your stored grain doesn't develop legs. Today's task? Weeding. Which sounds gentle until you realize it involves crouching for hours, pulling stubborn, spiky things from the earth while the sun does its best impression of divine punishment. You dig, yank, mutter, wipe your nose on your sleeve, and try not to think about the 100 more rows to go. You're surrounded by your siblings and cousins, all of you grumbling, racing to see who can clear a row the fastest, and occasionally flinging clumps of dirt at each other when no one's looking. Work gets done, eventually, in a wave of sweat, song, and dirt in your eyebrows. If it's planting time, you drop seeds into furrows opened by a plow. If it's harvest season, you get to swing a sickle, which is thrilling and mildly terrifying. You learn to cut with rhythm, to bind stalks into sheaves, to stack them so they don't topple like a very itchy game of Hey Jenga. You break for food under the nearest shady tree. Bread, cheese, onions. Maybe an apple if someone snuck one from the orchard. You eat fast, drink faster, and then lie back in the grass for 5 glorious minutes of not working. And then, back at it. You learn the land by feel. You know which patches dry too quickly, which weeds signal poor soil, where the best worms live. You're not just toiling, you're learning to read the earth like a book written in roots and rocks. Noble children do not, of course, do farm work. But they're not completely exempt from the land's influence. Your tutors teach you the importance of agriculture. You might help plan estate planting, or more likely, ride past the fields on a pony and gesture vaguely at crops while your steward nods. You learn which taxes to levy on peasants, how to manage grain stores, and why you really shouldn't schedule a hunting party during harvest unless you want to be muttered about in very rude Latin. If you're lucky, you get to pretend you're rustic for a day, carry a tiny basket into a vineyard, and dramatically pick 3 grapes before declaring yourself sun-weary. But for peasant kids like you, the work is constant. Seasonal. Sacred, in a way. You know that without your help, the bread doesn't rise, the porridge doesn't boil, the village doesn't eat. Here's your quirky dirt nugget for the day. Some medieval children created scare dolls from old rags and twigs to keep birds from snatching seeds. You'd prop them up in the fields like tiny soldiers, naming them things like Sir Squawkbane or Lady Flapsalot, and hope they worked better than last year's doll, who mysteriously disappeared, possibly kidnapped by crows. Historians still debate how young children were when they started full farm duties. Some say as early as 5, helping in small ways. Others argue the bulk of work didn't fall to you until your teens. Either way, you were there, growing alongside the grain, learning the rhythm of sun, soil, and sweat. By the end of the day, you're caked in dirt. Your legs wobble. Your face is a delightful patchwork of sunburn, freckles, and the single worst itch ever caused by hay down your tunic. You walk home slow, trailing behind your parents. The sky turns gold. Birds settle in the trees. You hum a work song under your breath, something about barley and blisters, and think about the bread that'll come from today's toil. You'll sleep well tonight. Deep, dreamless sleep earned the hard way, under an open sky, with the smell of soil still on your hands. Your arms feel like sacks of porridge and your legs have declared independence. After a full day in the fields, you expect, nay, demand, a bit of rest. But instead, you're handed a small basket, a slightly rusty knife, and a reminder not to eat everything you find. Why? Because it's time to forage. Foraging isn't just some trendy cottagecore pastime. It's survival. And for a medieval child, it's one of the few chores that feels like an adventure, like a treasure hunt with snacks. You're not just gathering plants. You're learning secrets hidden in the wild, which roots heal, which berries kill, and where the mushrooms are less likely to scream surprise tummy ache at midnight. You start near the edge of the woods. Safe enough to avoid bears, close enough that your mother can shout if you vanish for more than 20 minutes. Your older sister leads the expedition, mostly because she remembers which berries turned your cousin green last summer. You move carefully, eyes sharp, feet quieter than usual. There's something sacred about foraging, something ancient. You whisper to the trees, thank the bushes, and make mental deals with squirrels. I won't touch your stash if you leave mine alone. You fill your basket slowly. Wild garlic. Nettles for soup. A few hazelnuts. You spot elderberries but hesitate. Are they ripe? Are they safe? You think of the rhyme your grandmother taught you, something about red stems and birds' beaks, and decide it's not worth the risk. You'll live to snack another day. Then you find mushrooms. Big ones. Beautiful. You poke them cautiously, waiting for them to explode? Grow legs? You remember the rule, if the cap is shaped like a bishop's hat and smells like death, maybe don't touch it. You pick only the ones your family uses in stew, your nose doing most of the identifying. Your friends nearby shriek with joy, someone's found wild strawberries. You rush over, pluck a handful, pop one in your mouth, and oh, it's perfect. Sweet, sharp, tiny, and more satisfying than any bread crust you've ever nibbled. Peasant children forage because it's necessary. A good haul means variety in your otherwise repetitive diet. And if you're especially clever, you can sneak a few extra bites before anyone notices. But you also learn caution. Nature gives, and occasionally punishes. Noble children don't typically forage. Too dirty. Too risky. But you do hear about herbs and plants from your tutors. You learn what yarrow does, why monks prize valerian, and that mandrake screams are more story than reality, though you're still not testing that one. You might even keep a small garden of medicinal herbs, carefully labeled, your hands staying delightfully clean. You might accompany your family's herbalist or healer on a walk, not to touch, but to observe. You'll point at plants and nod sagely while they explain what helps headaches and what turns you into a cautionary tale. Quirky detail for today, some medieval foragers believed you had to ask permission from forest spirits before picking mushrooms or rare herbs. Children were often taught to bow slightly or say a rhyme to avoid angering the green folk. It might sound silly, until you've seen someone trip over nothing in the same patch 3 times. Historians still argue how much knowledge of wild plants was passed down to children. Some believe it was instinctive, part of play. Others think it was formal, drilled in with the same seriousness as prayers. You believe it's a bit of both, fun until someone picks the no-no berries. Back home, you present your basket like a victorious knight offering spoils to the crown. Your mother inspects it, removes a few questionable finds, nice try, but that's moss, dear, and praises your cleverness. Some of it goes in the pot. Some is set aside to dry. A few nuts vanish mysteriously into your pocket. You help with prep, washing leaves, chopping roots, stringing herbs to dry over the hearth. The kitchen smells like forest and earth. You feel proud, useful, like part of an invisible chain that stretches back through centuries. Later, over stew flavored with your own foraged garlic, you tell stories of near misses, of strange animal tracks, of the berry that bit back. Your father laughs. Your cousin gasps. And you, wild child of the hedgerow, know that tomorrow you'll find even better mushrooms. As the fire dims and your eyelids droop, your last thought is of a strawberry. Small, red, perfect. And entirely yours. The morning dew is still clinging to the grass like it has something to prove when your mother hands you a basket, a small cloth pouch, and a very firm instruction, to the woods, but stay on the path. That last part isn't optional. Because today, you're not foraging for snacks. You're collecting firewood and herbs for the healer. The woods near your village are a paradox. Enchanting and eerie, welcoming and watchful. To a medieval child, they're both playground and peril. You've grown up hearing tales of what hides beneath the trees, some true, most wildly embellished. Still, you go, because firewood doesn't fetch itself and the healer really needs more comfrey. You step into the forest. The path crunches beneath your feet. Birds gossip overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a deer snorts like it's judging your boots. You've been here before, but it always feels new, like the trees rearranged themselves while you slept, just for fun. You keep an eye out for dry branches, nothing too big. You're strong, but not Carielog strong. You gather sticks, twigs, kindling. Snap them over your knee. Stack them just so. Occasionally, you spot something odd, a bird's skull, a strange pile of stones, a patch of mushrooms that definitely weren't there yesterday. You make a mental note to walk faster. Then you look for herbs. The healer's list is short: comfrey root, plantain, and yarrow. You know these. You've helped grind them into salves and teas. You hum a little tune while you work, partly to keep rhythm, partly to let anything lurking know you're just passing through. You find comfrey near the stream, its leaves broad and hairy like a grumpy old man's eyebrows. You dig gently, bag the root, and rinse your hands in the icy water. Plantain grows near the footpath, flat leaves like stepping stones. Yarrow, with its feathery leaves and white flowers, waves hello from the clearing. Your pouch fills. Your basket's nearly full of wood. Time to head back, but not before one last detour. There's an old tree stump nearby, hollowed and mossy, that some kids claim is the fairy throne. You leave a pebble offering, just in case. Superstition? Maybe. But better safe than cursed. Peasant kids like you know the forest well. It's part of daily life. A source of food, medicine, fuel, danger, and magic. You learn where to step, what to touch, and which birds mean rain. The forest teaches in whispers and scratches. And you listen. Noble children, though not exactly forest savvy. You might ride through on a pony, cloaked in velvet, while servants clear the path of anything too crunchy. But you've heard the stories. You know forests are where knights get tested, monsters hide, and destinies are forged. You're told to fear them, but secretly, you dream of them. You might have a private wood near your estate, trimmed and tidy, where falcons are trained and hunting dogs chase terrified rabbits. You learn names of trees from books, not bark. But the allure of wild woods still tugs at you. One day, you think you'll sneak out. Just for a little while. Just to see if the fairy throne is real. Here's your quirky nature nugget. Some medieval children believed you could talk to trees if you listened hard enough. Certain oaks were wise, certain willows gossiped. A boy in Brittany once claimed a beech tree told him where to find lost sheep. The sheep were eventually found. The tree? Still silent. Historians still argue about how much time children actually spent in forests. Some believe it was constant, part of the rhythm of rural life. Others suggest it was limited by fear and folklore. But you know better. You've been there. Felt the chill. Smelled the damp earth. Heard the stories. By afternoon, you return home triumphant. Wood stacked neatly. Herbs delivered. The healer nods approval and gives you a sweet, bitter sip of something that might be gratitude or just leftover nettle tea. You smile anyway. That evening, as the fire crackles with the wood you gathered, you tell your siblings about the strange tree that looked like it had eyes. You may or may not exaggerate. Your sister squeals. Your cousin insists it was a spirit. You all agree not to go back tomorrow. Unless, of course, you do. You fall asleep with forest still in your nose. Leaf smoke. Moss. A trace of magic. And the faintest feeling that something in the woods whispered goodbye. The morning light filters through the shutters in lazy slats, and you think, just for a second, you might get to sleep in. But then comes the telltale knock. Not a polite tap, mind you. A thump 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 that vibrates through your skull. The kind of knock that says, "Wake up, child, it's time to learn something whether you like it or not." It's the local parish clerk. He's come for the lesson. Now, don't get too excited. School for a medieval child isn't rows of desks and recess bells. It's often one bored adult, one overcrowded room, and enough wax tablets to make your fingers permanently sticky. And if you're a peasant, this might be your only lesson all week. Or all year. If you're lucky. Today's class is in the churchyard. The clerk carries a satchel of books, locked shut because they're worth more than your family's cow, a flask of something suspiciously thick, and a scowl that suggests he'd rather be anywhere else. You sit on a bench. Or a log. Or the cold, slightly damp ground. The other kids file in, some curious, some half asleep, one already chewing on a feather quill like it owes him money. The clerk clears his throat and begins. You're learning your letters. Latin ones, of course. The alphabet is sung aloud, badly. Then comes writing practice. You trace shapes into wax with a stylus, hands trembling, wax melting under your breath. The letter A looks like a broken ladder. The B might be a goat. You hope he's not grading on style. Then comes the recitation. The Lord's Prayer, of course. Maybe a psalm. You say the words even if you don't fully grasp them, because rhythm matters more than meaning when the goal is to avoid being called on twice. If the clerk's in a good mood, he tells a story about a saint who wrestled a bear, or a king who disguised himself as a monk, or the time a scholar got struck by lightning for spelling Dominus wrong. You take note. Latin is risky business. For noble children, learning is slightly more luxurious and more relentless. You have a tutor? Maybe two. You study Latin, Greek, theology, rhetoric, arithmetic, and how to maintain an air of detached superiority when peasants look at you funny. You learn indoors, at a desk, with quills and ink and books you're not allowed to smudge. Your tutor assigns dictation and expects essays in verse. You write about the fall of Troy, and then immediately recite prayers about resisting the temptation of pride. It's a confusing combo. Sometimes, noble children are sent to monasteries for schooling. There, you copy manuscripts, chant with monks, and compete to see who can stay silent longest. Spoiler, not you. You once sneezed during a lecture and accidentally launched an ink pot across the table. Still a highlight of your academic career. Meanwhile, in your peasant village, the lesson ends with a test of memory. The clerk points to you. You panic. He says, spell Agnes. You freeze, then blurt out something that starts with egg. He sighs, nods, and marks the lesson average. Here's a quirky classroom nugget. In some towns, children were taught math using bread loaves. Fractions became delicious, until someone ate the denominator. One legendary boy managed to solve an entire problem by devouring the evidence before his teacher could check it. His punishment? Indigestion and mild fame. Historians still argue about how widespread peasant education was in the Middle Ages. Some claim literacy was shockingly rare. Others point to surprising levels of functional literacy, especially in towns with active churches and merchants. You don't know the stats, you just know that today, you learned how to write a P that doesn't look like a goose falling down. As you walk home, you trace letters in the dirt with a stick. A, B, C. Then a lopsided heart, because your cousin dared you. You feel clever. Important. A little bit magical. At supper, you show off your wax tablet. Your parents squint, nod, and say it looks like a very nice potato. You don't care. You made marks. You remembered the prayer. You didn't fall asleep fully. That night, you dream of letters dancing in your head, glowing, whispering, reshaping the world. And maybe, just maybe, you start to believe that knowing how to read might be just as powerful as knowing how to swing a sword. You wake the next day with letters still swirling behind your eyes and a faint smear of wax on your cheek. But today isn't for alphabets or saints. Today, your uncle claps his hands, looks you dead in the eye, and says, "It's time you learned a real trade." That can only mean one thing: apprenticeship day. Now, this doesn't mean you're packing off to some distant city to apprentice under a master silversmith just yet. No, this is the village version. Which means shadowing someone who knows a craft marginally better than you know how to tie your shoes. It's part education, part humiliation, and part, if you're lucky, a free meal. Your first stop, the blacksmith. He greets you with a grunt and a nod, then immediately hands you tongs the size of your arm and says, "Hold this." Within minutes, your face is sweating, your arms are shaking, and you're 98% certain your eyebrows just signed a resignation letter. The forge is alive. Fire roars. Metal screams as it's shaped. Sparks fly like angry fireflies. The blacksmith pounds a glowing horseshoe on the anvil with rhythmic confidence, and you try not to flinch every time it rings like a bell with a temper problem. You don't get to forge anything, thankfully, but you pump the bellows, carry coal, and listen. He explains how metal speaks, how heat is everything, and how patience separates a horseshoe from a heap of regret. You nod sagely. Your arms say otherwise. Next stop, the weaver. This feels safer. Softer. There's a loom the size of a small boat and enough yarn to knit a dragon costume for every child in the village. The weaver shows you how to thread the shuttle, how to tighten the warp, how to keep rhythm. It's hypnotic, like weaving a secret language. You try. You fail. Your first attempt looks like a woolen bird's nest. But she praises your effort and lets you braid scraps into a bracelet. You feel proud. Until your cousin calls it a dirt snake. You move on to the carpenter. He smells like sawdust and good intentions. You hold planks. Fetch nails. Learn the difference between a mortise and a tenon, and that hammering your thumb is a rite of passage. You wince, whimper, and try not to cry while your instructor offers you a hearty slap on the back and a raw onion to rub on the bruise. Medieval first aid at its finest. As a peasant child, this kind of apprenticeship is casual at first. You try different trades. Learn bits and pieces. When you're older, your parents might formally send you to train under someone, sometimes for years, sometimes in another town. In exchange for your labor, you get food, shelter, and the chance to learn a skill that might one day feed your family. Noble children, of course, don't apprentice in the sweaty, soot-covered sense. But you do learn courtly skills. Swordplay. Heraldry. Diplomacy. You study under knights or scribes, learning to fight, write, flatter, and pose dramatically near tapestries. If you're a noble boy, you might become a page, then a squire, eventually, hopefully, a knight. You polish armor, serve at banquets, and spend way too much time being yelled at by someone in chainmail. If you're a noble girl, your education leans toward managing households, embroidery that could rival the Sistine Chapel, and surviving marriage arrangements without fainting too often. But you may also learn music, medicine, even business, depending on your family's ambition. Quirky trade tidbit: some kids apprentice to less glamorous professions, like rat catchers or gong farmers, sewage collectors. One boy in Kent reportedly trained under a professional mole whacker. Yes, that was a thing. The village paid him per mole. He became a local legend. You can't make this stuff up. Historians still debate how rigid or flexible apprenticeship systems were in rural areas. Some say it was strict, years of servitude and oaths. Others believe it was informal, more about need and trust than contracts. Either way, you didn't get to be picky. You learned what your village needed, or what your parents chose, or what fate flung your way. By sundown, you're soaring places you didn't know had nerves. Your hands are raw from rope work. Your tunic smells like fire, wool, and onions. But your brain, brimming. You've learned more today than in a month of sermon snoozing. You sit with your friends around a cooking pot, comparing injuries and stories. I bent a nail backward. I made yarn. I nearly forged my foot. You laugh. You show off your dirt snake bracelet. You feel like, maybe you could do this. Maybe one of these crafts could be yours. As you lie in bed that night, your dreams swirl with looms and anvils and sawdust. You whisper your favorite craft to yourself, not loud enough for your siblings to hear. It's a secret, for now. But one day, it might just shape your life. The next morning, your body is an aching patchwork of bruises and blisters, but your spirit, pretty smug. You made it through apprenticeship day with all limbs attached and only one minor splinter drama. But don't get too comfortable, because today, you're being dragged somewhere less physical, more spiritual. It's church time. Now, church for a medieval child isn't just a place you go to mumble prayers and sneak naps during the homily. It's the center of your world, the place where you're baptized, taught, scolded, married off, forgiven, and occasionally scared into obedience by wall paintings of sinners being roasted like kebabs. You tug on your best tunic, aka the one with the fewest visible patches, and follow your family down the muddy path to the village church. It's a stone building with a slanted roof, moss creeping up the walls, and bells that toll with terrifying precision the moment you think about skipping. Inside, it's cool and shadowy. The air smells like old wood, smoke, and something faintly holy, or possibly mildew. You find your usual spot, wedged between your fidgety cousin and the village baker's child who's always humming. The service begins. Latin chants echo off stone. You don't understand most of it, but the rhythm is soothing. The priest moves through the rites with the slow solemnity of someone who knows everyone's secrets. You bow, kneel, sit, stand, repeat. Your knees crack. Your back twinges. You whisper prayers into your sleeve and try to ignore the spider dangling from the rafters. This might sound dull, but it's not. Church is theater. There are candles, bells, incense. Stories of miracles, warnings about sin, dramatic readings from scriptures. You hear about saints who bled light and demons who disguised themselves as helpful chickens. You take it all in. It's terrifying. It's fascinating. It's better than half the stories you heard at the market. After Mass, children gather near the side chapel for instruction. You recite prayers, learn about feast days, and listen to parables that sometimes include animals and sometimes sound suspiciously like village gossip with biblical seasoning. You learn about penance, how to confess when you steal apples or use the Lord's name when you stub your toe. You're taught to fear hell, revere heaven, and try not to sneeze during the Our Father. Church also means events. Feast days, saints' festivals, processions where you carry candles or banners and try very hard not to trip. There's music, mystery plays, and the chance to sneak a second helping of dried fruit from the back table. These days are magical, half prayer, half party. If you're a noble child, your experience of church is more elevated. You sit near the front, possibly on an actual chair, with servants fanning you when it's warm and whispering Latin corrections when you zone out. You wear finer robes. You pretend to follow the Mass while plotting ways to ask your tutor if jousting counts as a sin. Your family might have its own private chapel. Services just for you. A confessor who comes to your chamber. You learn your theology with a side of inheritance law and why your uncle thinks the bishop is a political inconvenience. But regardless of class, church is inescapable. It defines the rhythm of your days. Matins, Vespers, feast days, Lent. You might not understand every word, but the meaning seeps in. Be good. Be humble. Behave, or face a particularly artistic rendering of eternal doom. Here's your quirky ecclesiastical tidbit. Some medieval churches had doom paintings over the arch of the nave, huge murals of the Last Judgment. On one side, angels welcome the righteous. On the other, demons gleefully hauling sinners into bubbling cauldrons. One church even painted a demon playing bagpipes while dancing on someone's head. Motivational art, medieval style. Historians still argue how much theology medieval children truly absorbed. Some believe you parroted prayers without grasping meaning. Others think the drama of the rituals, the repetition, and the art gave you a deeper sense of awe and moral compass than many adults today. After the service, you run outside with the others, shoes kicking up dust, heart light. You reenact the sermon in dramatic whispers. "I am Saint George, slayer of dragons and wasters of bread," someone shouts. You sword fight with sticks, declare excommunications over dandelions, and quote Latin phrases you definitely mispronounce. By midday, you're back home. A meal. A nap. Maybe a game if the weather's good. But your thoughts linger on the church. On the candlelight. On the priest's voice echoing like thunder. You don't fully understand it, but you feel it. Like a thread pulling you toward something bigger, older, unknowable. That night, you dream of angels with flaming swords, saints in shining robes, and one demon playing bagpipes. You wake with a mix of fear and wonder. And maybe, just maybe, a slightly better understanding of why everyone keeps telling you to be good. You're lounging on a sun-warmed patch of grass, belly full from midday bread and cheese, when your friend runs up, face flushed, eyes sparkling. "They're here," she shouts. That's all it takes. You leap to your feet and sprint toward the village square, tunic flapping, heart thudding. They are the traveling performers. Minstrels, mummers, jugglers, maybe even an acrobat if the roads have been kind. Their arrival is like a miracle, a brief suspension of the usual dirt and soup routine. Even the animals seem curious. A goat tilts its head as a man in mismatched stripes juggles apples with one eye closed. You find a spot near the front, feet dangling off a barrel. The show begins. A musician plucks a lute and sings a bawdy ballad about a knight, a pie, and a scandal involving a goat. You snort into your sleeve. Another performer juggles knives, badly, but survives. A woman in a patched cloak does impressions of local nobles that make even the priest laugh, and then quickly look serious. Then the play begins. It's a morality play today. A classic. A character named Everyman Faces Death, who wears a creepy mask and definitely borrowed someone's funeral robe. The actors shout, gesture wildly, and stomp around in shoes too big for drama. The story's simple: sin is bad, repentance is good, always return the borrowed bucket. You watch, rapt. This isn't just entertainment. It's teaching. Most of the villagers can't read. But they can watch. They can feel. The stories make sense. right and wrong played out in real time, complete with dramatic fainting. You love it all. The laughter, the gasps, the moment someone's hat flies off mid-monologue and everyone claps like it was planned. This is theatre in its rawest form, messy, loud, alive. Performers pass a hat afterward. Coins drop in. You sneak up and toss in a pebble. You're broke, but it's the thought that counts. The juggler winks at you. You feel like royalty. Later, some kids gather to mimic the show. You all assign roles. You, naturally, play deaf. Your cousin insists on being the pie. A stick becomes a sword. A blanket becomes a cape. The play devolves into chaos within minutes, but no one minds. You're laughing too hard. These performers are more than wandering oddballs. They're newsbearers, storytellers, culture carriers. They bring tales of far-off cities, jokes from distant taverns, dances that are somehow both ancient and slightly inappropriate. They're history books in human form. Noble children get performances too, but curated. At court, bards and troubadours sing polished songs of courtly love, epic battles, and how beautiful Lady So-and-so's ankles looked last Tuesday. You sit straight, sip watered wine, and pretend not to giggle when a minstrel makes a sly joke about your uncle's bald spot. You might even learn an instrument. The lute, the harp, maybe a recorder if you're feeling daring. You practice scales while your tutor weeps softly into his robes. You learn songs about honor, chivalry, and why you should never trust a woman with 3 parrots. Still, nothing matches the raw joy of outdoor performance. The dust, the laughter, the applause that sounds like rain on a tin roof. Even nobles long for it. You watch from your manor's tower, wishing you could just once run barefoot into the square and play the pie. Here's your quirky drama tidbit. In some towns, traveling performers weren't allowed to stay overnight, too much risk of mischief. So they'd camp just outside the gates, lighting fires, telling stories late into the night. Kids would sneak out to listen. One girl reportedly traded her shoes just to hear the end of a joke. The punchline? Still lost to time. Historians still argue how much influence these performers had on medieval society. Were they respected or reviled? Teachers or troublemakers? Saints in motley or jesters with secret agendas? Probably a bit of all that. But for you, they're magic. Living, breathing, ridiculous magic. As the sun sets, the performers pack up. You wave, they bow. One tosses you a broken feather from his cap. You tuck it behind your ear and swear never to lose it. Spoiler, you will. But not today. You walk home slowly, replaying every joke, every song, every fall-flat moment that made you laugh until your ribs hurt. You swear that next time, you'll be brave enough to stand up and sing something too. That night, you whisper your own story into the dark. It's dramatic, poorly paced, and possibly plagiarized. But it's yours. And it ends with the crowd roaring. You wake before dawn to the distant sound of hooves. At first, you think it's a dream, horses pounding over wet earth, dogs barking, bells ringing in their iron throats. Then your father's already up, throwing on boots and muttering, "The Lord's hunting party." And just like that, your day is rewritten. In a medieval village, a noble hunt is like a thunderstorm, loud, fast, and liable to flatten anyone who doesn't move quickly enough. You scramble outside to see a blur of banners, armor glinting, dogs lunging on leashes, and servants darting like startled birds. It's chaos wrapped in velvet and fur. You're not part of the hunt. Of course not. But you will spend the day dodging its wake. First task, get the geese out of the road. You flap and yell, waving your arms like a half-baked scarecrow. One goose fights back. You retreat with honor. The hunting party barely notices. Then it's down to the woods again. Your family's plot lies dangerously close to the hunting paths. You're told to stay clear, which naturally means you watch from the underbrush with 3 other kids, faces painted with dirt, pretending you're spies in an elaborate woodland drama. You hear the horns first, deep and haunting. Then the dogs, baying like wolves who just read a vengeance poem. Then the shouts, tally-ho, or there it goes, or where's my boot? The deer, slender, quick, doomed, leaps through the glade like a ghost of spring. It's beautiful. For one breathless second, time slows. Then come the riders, yelling, galloping, disrupting every romantic notion you just had. Back at the village, preparations have already started for the after-hunt feast. And here's the twist, you're helping. Because when nobles hunt, someone has to cook what they catch. And someone has to clean up the mess. You help the kitchen crew. Pluck birds. Clean vegetables. Arrange herbs like you're preparing a bouquet for a particularly picky ghost. The air fills with the scent of roasting meat, garlic, and panic. If you're lucky, you'll get scraps. The haunch that didn't pass muster. The tiny pastry someone dropped. And if you're really lucky, a kind noble might toss you a coin for catching a runaway spaniel earlier. Meanwhile, noble children are playing their part too. If you're old enough, you ride with the hunt. You don't do much, mostly look impressive and try not to fall off. But you get to wear the outfit, deep green tunic, tiny dagger, feathered cap tilted at just the right angle. You ride beside your parent or guardian, clutching the reins and pretending to scan the trees for movement. In truth, you're watching the dogs and wondering if anyone would notice if you just quietly snuck back for more honeyed pears. If you're too young for horses, you stay at the manor, practicing falconry with a bird that hates you, or listening to an older cousin brag about the time they caught a hare with nothing but a stare and a pointed stick. You roll your eyes and try not to look too jealous. As the feast begins, you watch from a distance. The music starts. Laughter rises. The Lord's voice booms above it all, retelling a hunting tale where the deer was this big and the dogs sang like angels. You don't hear all the words, but you can guess most. Later, if the mood is good and the wine flows freely, the line between noble and peasant softens just enough for leftovers to be shared. You get a slice of meat, still warm. A chunk of bread soaked in drippings. A cup of watered ale that makes your ears buzz. You eat under the stars, surrounded by others just like you, tired, happy, full. Here's a quirky hunting tidbit. Some nobles believed certain animals could curse a hunt. A deer with white hooves? Bad luck. A fox that stares directly at you? Possibly a witch in disguise. One knight reportedly refused to hunt on Wednesdays after seeing a squirrel dance on his saddle. Not sure what that means, but it makes a great story. Historians still debate how much medieval hunting was sport versus spectacle versus practical food gathering. Likely all three, tangled together like a pile of leashes. For nobles, it was training for war. For peasants, it was disruption and rare excitement. For children, it was a window into another world, louder, richer, more dangerous. As the embers of the feast fire glow, and the dogs finally curl into silence, you sit with your back against a barrel and look up. The sky is full of stars. The kind you only notice after a long day outside. You're full. You're filthy. You're happy. You saw something wild today. Something ancient. A chase older than the village itself. You whisper your own hunting tale to the stars. It's exaggerated. Maybe there's a dragon in it. Definitely a goose. And it ends with you catching the deer and being crowned king of snacks. You drift off like that, dreaming of horns and hoofbits and glory. The embers of the feast fire glow faint in the distance now, soft red pulses beneath a blanket of ash, as the village drifts into its nightly hush. You lie curled under a woven blanket, one foot still tingling from today's run through the woods, your hair perfumed faintly with smoke, meat, and maybe a hint of goose. The stars will slowly above, ancient and unmoved by your tiny triumphs, yet somehow watching. The sky is deep and velvet black, pierced with distant flickers like a tapestry sewn by patient gods. You take a slow breath of night air, of quiet, of the soft mossy scent of sleep. Today was full of learning, laughter, hunger, work, and story. You sang, ran, wept, whispered, and maybe lied a little about catching that squirrel with your bare hands. But you lived in the full, bustling tangle of medieval childhood, where magic hides in every hedgerow and danger wears the face of both wolves and chores. Your fingers uncurl. Your eyelids grow heavy. The world becomes softness, wool under your cheek, warm breath against your collarbone, the remembered rhythm of bells and birds and distant hoofbeats. Someone nearby turns in their sleep. The fire crackles one last time. You're safe. You're still. You're enough. The village sleeps with you, healer, smith, priest, child. Chickens settle in coops, dogs twitch in dreams, and even the moon, now high and round, glides slowly behind a cloud as if shushing the world. Let your breath slow. Let the stories fade. Let the lantern of your mind dim gently. You're home. You're held. You're asleep.